celebration, the first of many.
Yes.
Now, I need to go find my eyeglasses.
It's on your head. They're on your head.
Thank you for
I was
finding
here.
them
I was
for
here
me.
for that.
Yeah, thank you for finding them for me. Whew, that was scary. That's usually where they are too. Then I go find another pair, and then I'm like doing this and go, oh.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, it is a big club. So, I want us to center for a second so we can get in the right frame of mind and spirit for where we are and why we're here. If I burst into tears, it's okay. All right, because I'm extremely emotional when I talk about my family, the history of my family, and how we became who we have become. So today is Juneteenth. It's a day of spiritual pilgrimage for African Americans. It's a day we honor our ancestors and pay respect to the struggle that they endured so I could sit here and chit-chat with you now. We have poured a libation of red wine. We have fixed them a plate of food. And we have put out Dr. Elijah Anderson's book as a gift to the ancestors to let them know you did good. We honor you. We're proud to be a part of you. I'm going to begin with something that I hope I'm as good at as the person who created it. Another of our incredible ancestors, Dr. Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like the moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise. Did you want me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I got gold mines digging in my backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from the past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling. I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear. I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrous and clear. I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise. I rise. That's what we feel. That's what I feel. That's what we, as an African American community, feel. It's what we hold on to when we see our brothers and sisters beat up, when we see our rights taken away, when we see them trying to take our history away from us in the schools, when we see them crazy people being crazy people. We won't bring them up here because we're in the room of our ancestors. And they have already explained to us what being around crazy people we can survive with the crazy we got. I took 10 kids and 10 teachers from San Francisco's Hunter Point African American community to Paris and to Senegal in 2004. And we went to Gorée Island. And when I walked into the slave house, my soul just cried because I could feel. You saw this room over here where men were chained. You saw the room over there where women were chained. You saw the room over here where children were chained. Families that were torn apart. Families torn apart, put in a cell, chained to a wall, hands chained to their feet for 3 months before they drugged them to the door of no return, where rocks around the bottom of the ships that were waiting were covered in blood of the slaves that couldn't make it or who decided they preferred to die, and they were tossed out there for the sharks to eat. The rest were put on ships, so dispersed all over the globe, and here we are today, who we are today. See, this is a spiritual pilgrimage. This is a spiritual pilgrimage for the African American community. This is a tie, a link to our past, to our ancestors. Our vote is our voice. We have joined ourselves together, and we're a formidable force. That's why you had Barack Obama, and that's why you're going to see other change, because we are powerful. On Juneteenth, our voices carry to heaven, to the hearts of our ancestors who were snatched from us, stolen from their homes, separated from their families. Our culture and history was obliterated, and they're doing it again today. Our language stolen, our roots ripped from us. It was illegal to educate us. We were listed as inventory in the census of plantation owners. We lost our names. We lost our music. We lost our traditions. And yet, after more than 400 years of slavery and 158 years since the abolishment of slavery in America, we have stared hatred in the eye and found a way to thrive. With every accomplishment we achieve, a new obstacle is formed in hopes of keeping us down. First, not informing slaves they were free in Galveston for 2.5 years. Then Jim Crow. Then KKK organizations that have yet to be deemed hate groups by the U.S. government. Poor education systems, high unemployment, slave wages, a prison labor system, economic starvation. Our ancestors endured it all. And we're here today because of their endurance. So we honor them. Black lives matter. This is a spiritual pilgrimage. For me, this is an opportunity to honor not only my parents and my grandparents who watched me from above, but to honor more distant ancestors I have been able to locate through genealogy, such as my great-great-grandfather, John Buckner, who I found on the Freeman's Bank Registry for July 7th, 1873, and my great-great-great-grandmother, Ellen Buckner, born a slave in 1835, and died a free woman in 1910. And her parents, Moses Handy and Violet Harris, who were born in 1801 and 1810 respectively, whom I found on the inventory for General Buckner, whose plantation was their prison. As data becomes more available, we're able to reach back, but only to the point where our identity was nothing more than a document saying things like 1 female slave, 10 male slaves, 10 children. See, Black lives matter. This is a spiritual pilgrimage. My grandfather was the only African American to own a foot support shoe store chain in the 50-year history of the stores. He had the smallest store at 47th and Martin Luther King Drive, Howard for Chicago, but it was generated the most sales outside of the flagship store in New York City. He was the president of the Building Association and held the first Negro Business Expo in Chicago in 1939. If it were not for the Chicago Defenders' existence, this event would have gone undocumented, as so much of our history has been and will be if a GOP candidate should get in office. However, also at the age of 15, my grandfather lived at ground zero of the 1919 Red Summer riots in Chicago, as did all of my ancestors. Ooh, what y'all do with page 5? Don't you like when somebody's really attentive and all of a sudden it's...
You're fine.
My uncle Willie Buckner was there as well. He was 23 years old. He had just returned from fighting in World War I. He was who they were looking for. They were lynching African-American men in uniform. A rabid crowd of rioters wanted his neck most of all. But all these stories, my ancestors never shared with me. I learned this after they died. My Aunt Ella Rose, my mother's great-great-aunt, ran for her life in Oklahoma. She did tell us this story. She shared with my mother how she escaped Black Wall Street in Oklahoma, barely, ended up in San Francisco on Fillmore Street, and all around her, the buildings were gone because of the racism and discrimination of redevelopment. They tore down our middle-class community in San Francisco. My pride is that the building that she lived in is still the only one that's still standing at Steiner and O'Farrell. Today is a spiritual pilgrimage, not a party, but a remembrance of those whose shoulders we stand on. Why do you number the pages if you don't stick it in the wrong one? You number pages, but I'm reading them wrong. Okay, lucky you. You guys get me on. No, Shelly. Hey, my goddaughter Eva is here. Hey. So, this is the reason that we're here today. When you look at us as a community, you see a thread, a string that takes us back to people who made the crossing, who is probably related to some of the people who are in the Middle Passage, who jumped ship or who were thrown overboard for whatever reason. If you've ever been to Goree Island, you would know that right across from the slave house, there is a museum called the Musée de la Femme, and it is in, or was, because they moved to Dakar now. It was in a building that was shaped exactly like a ship. So what the slave merchants would do is pack the slaves into this building to get an idea how many bodies they could put on the ship so they could calculate their profit. So when you are on Goree Island and you're seeing this, filled with anger, pain, but you also filled with determination, confidence. Because let me tell you something, if you haven't noticed it in me, I'm a formidable force. I'm gonna fight for my community. I will die happily for my community. I'll come back to life and die again for my community. I am an African-American woman, proud of who she is, proud of my grandmother Gertrude, proud of my grandmother Betty, proud of my grandfather Buckner, everybody who brought me up and everybody who's in my DNA. Now, I told you we're from the plantation of the Buckners, right? So I am going to get my DNA tested. Because if there's any connection that can be proven, I'm going to go and register for the Daughters of the Confederate. Now, so you heard my story, but everybody here that knows me as an organizer watched me walk in and fall in a chair, and they're like, "Are you okay? You're hot." I'm always hot. But I read the story of the woman I'm here to honor, which is Oprah Lee. Oprah Lee spent a lifetime getting Juneteenth as a federal holiday. And when she turned 80 years old, she decided that she was going to walk 2.5 miles every single day. She did it in the morning and again at night until Juneteenth was a holiday. I live 1.1 miles from here, and I almost called it Uber. And as I'm walking in honor of her, I'm walking in her footsteps as I'm coming here, and I'm like, I'm tired! And I'm 68 years old. All right, this 80-year-old woman did it every single day. And she still does it today because she's created the walk as ways of raising money for a museum that she's building in her hometown, Fort Worth, Texas, that used to be a KKK organizing center. She's creating a healing and wellness center there. Oh, wow. Turn the bad to the good. So, she was born on October 7th, 1926. And when she was 12 years old, at 10 years old, her family had moved into an all-white neighborhood in Terrell Heights in Texas. And when she was 12, 500 white rioters vandalized and burned down her family home. You know what the date was? June 19th, 1939. And she said, because they burned her house down on Juneteenth, she felt this was her God-given responsibility to see that this became a holiday. And so she has been organizing. She's walked 1,400 miles from Texas to Washington, D.C. And on June 17th, 2021, President Joe Biden signed their Senate Bill S-475, making this a federal holiday. We appreciate it, but I haven't worked on Juneteenth in 20 years. You can make it a holiday if you want to, because it's always been a holiday to me. No? So, she has retired in 1976. She's now 96 years old. And she is creating, as I told you, the Wellness Center in Texas. She's raising money. It's a nonprofit organization called the Fred Rouse Center and Museum, because Fred Rouse was a black man who was lynched by a Fort Worth mob in 1921. This woman means the world to me because she's 96 years old. She'll be 97, October 7th. And she don't sleep. She still walks. She still fights. She still works. She still believes. She still knows that we still rise. She started walking in September of 2016, 2.5 miles all the way to DC, and she finished it on a date that's missing in my notes. Sometime in 2017. All right, look it up, Google it. So what she did for Juneteenth is why we're here. This is a spiritual pilgrimage. This is us honoring our people. And it's also an opportunity for us to hear from some of the people who've been fighting for a while. Now, I asked the next speaker for his bio, and he told me, I'm a black dude, Shelly, that's all you gotta say. Right? But I will say this, we learned after we met that we had both worked on Harold Washington's campaign back in Chicago. Wish I had met him then. And honestly, I love the way this man talks. I love who he is. I love what he brings. He is an organizer for Get Out the Vote. And he's got some, he has the plan we need to follow. And I just admire him from the bottom of my heart. Every time I get a call that goes, hey, boo, I know he's about to ask me to do something for him. So let me bring up my boo, Mr. Horace Small.
Does the microphone come out?
I think it does.
Right.
The other one does as well. Hey, if you
All
want
right,
to that
look,
one
I
too.
don't do, I'm
You
sorry,
don't do podium.
I'm sorry, I don't do podiums. I used to have to do that when I was a city governor. So I have to do that. Hello, everybody. My name is Horace Small. How are you?
All right.
Fantastic.
Oh, hell no. That's bullshit. I mean, that's like, excuse my language, this is a church. This is bull, S-H-I-T. Look, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Okay? Thank you. Okay. Welcome to Juneteenth. I can tell you right now that the ancestors, I am more than confident and pleased about the libation, are pleased about the good food. Thank you, whoever was the one that created that. Where's Ada? Ada and whoever else that came up with the food. Okay. I can tell you that ancestors are pleased. And I can also tell you that with the gift that we gave to the ancestors, which is my dear friend, Professor Elijah Anderson's books, are also pleasing as well. So I'm grateful to you all here. This is supposed to be a celebration. This is not supposed to be a bunch of people sitting around doing white people shit and stuff like, no, we're supposed to laugh. We're supposed to have fun. You know, we're supposed to do things together. Do y'all know everybody know each other in here? If you want to take a minute, say hi or wave to each other, that would be good as well. Okay? Because this is Juneteenth. This is the one time out of the year that we as black people celebrate who we are. And I have celebrated this all my life, and I'm 70 years old. And in Philadelphia, where I come from, it all constituted block parties and things of that nature and music and what have you. It's wonderful that the president signed this into law, but guess what? We celebrate every day. I celebrate being black every day, so I'm very grateful for this holiday. But more than that, my task is to tell you about a friend of mine who just passed away a couple of months ago, a friend of mine for more than 40 years, a colleague, someone who I looked up to, who was a colleague, who became a colleague, who became a mentor, and who became, over the last 26 years of his life, probably one of my closest friends, a gentleman by the name of Harry Belafonte. I'm sure all of you know who he is, but one of the great challenges that you have, not for me, because if you want to know, black history is American history. So if you want to know American history, you need to read it and not the crap that Ron DeSantis is trying to tell you to read. Okay? You know, or what's that, jackass Abbott or whomever else in all the southern states. Harry Belafonte, if you really want to get technical, is the catalyst why they're here today, why Shelley's here today, why Professor Anderson's here today, why my dear sister on her bicycle's here today, why we are here, why Juan is here today. Harry's the reason why we're here. Because Harry made his name. He started out as an actor at the YMCA in Harlem. And if you know anything about Harlem back in the day, It was the intellectual capital of the United States for black people. He and his friends, Sidney Poitier, they learned how to act. And Harry B., the first one to tell you, he couldn't act with a damn. He was honest about it. Look at his movies. It's pretty clear. Okay? He wasn't a very good actor. But what he was when he introduced calypso in the 50s to people in the United States, people took to that like a cat to milk. They just took to it. And Harry went from being this obscure jerk, who lived on 127th and now Martin Luther King Boulevard, in Harlem, to now an international star. But what he also was, through Communist Party, Socialist Party, and others, he was an activist and an organizer. And arguably, probably outside of maybe Saul Alinsky, outside of Cesar Chavez, Harry was probably the best organizer in history. He probably was. Because the thing about was, Harry really cut his teeth in the civil rights movement. He was the one that was able to bring together the minds of the civil rights movement, the Whitney Youngs from the Urban League, the Roy Wilkins from the NAACP, and others who were involved, Vernon Jordan, and all these other players, who were involved in the civil rights movement. And the dilemma was with these guys is that the one thing that Harry learned through, because he was a Gandhian, he practiced the Gandhian principles of nonviolence. And one of the things that Harry learned was the importance of subjugating, chill out on your ego, right? So Harry made himself the catalyst of everything that these guys, I don't like you, John Lewis, because you're a little 4-foot fart, and and you think you got these kids, and I don't like you, Whitney Young, because all you are is a job agency, you have no right at this table. And Roy Wilkins hated all of them. We don't like you, Martin Luther King, because you run around talking about all these preachers. Harry was the focal person that brought everybody together. He was the one that they would talk to. He was the one that would referee all the fights and all the crap that came with ego. Because he was the most egoless person that you would ever meet, despite his fame. He was the most egoless person he ever met. He was the one that paid for that was the main fundraiser for the civil rights movement. He was the one that did the work and paid for and paid the I forgot the brother's name in Michigan, in Maryland, but who paid for the lobbyists for the NAACP to lobby Congress and the Democratic Congress that really didn't want to give a damn, because at the time, the Democrats, all the committee chairs were run by Southerners. Quite honestly, it was the Republicans, Everett Dirksen, and a handful of Northern congressional people that was able to fight this movement in Washington, because the Southerners, Richard, what was his name? The guy who was oh, you don't know? All right. Well, all the committee chairs, John Eastman was the chair of the Judiciary Committee. He was from Mississippi. So he spent all his time, a Democrat, spent all his time trying to make sure that none of this stuff happened. Harry was the one that paid for the demonstrators who got arrested to get out of jail. Harry was the one who paid for the march from Selma to Montgomery. Not only did he do that, he also used his reputation as a star to bring others into it. He brought Charlton Heston. Y'all may not like him because he was a gun nut, but he was pretty big on civil rights, okay? Tony Bennett, everybody. And when they had that march in Montgomery, he marched with them. He was Martin Luther King's best friend. And Martin Luther King would come to his place on East 73rd Street, Manhattan, and they would sit down and talk and plan and challenge and create the movement that we came to know as the Civil Rights Movement. He lost his best friend. When you walk into Harry's home, going through the hallway is a history lesson. Letters from Dr. King, his Oscar, his Emmy, is this. And Harry was the most humble person that you could find. It was Harry, who was instrumental in making sure that there was a movement for apartheid. It was Harry who was upset with the President of the United States at that time, George Bush, and a guy named Dick Cheney, who was running around making sure that Congress did not recognize the ANC and recognize the struggle that was going on in the ANC and supporting the right-wing government in South Africa. It was Harry who came up with the idea, we kind of come up with something to take care of Africa. So in the meantime, we got this thing going on in Ethiopia where people are starving to death. And not because they're not growing any vegetables or anything, but because of tribal crap. We have another tribe starving out another tribe. So you remember USA for Africa? Do you remember that? Do you remember that song, We Are the World?
Yeah.
That was Harry. Harry got Lionel Richie to write it. He went and got Quincy Jones to produce it. And that song raised $75 million of today, which today will come up to an equal $211 million. Because the United States wasn't giving any money to Africa, he raised the money to do it. That was Harry Belafonte. And he devoted his whole life, social justice, indigenous rights, farm workers' rights, education, healthcare, across the world. He created 3 foundations that would support this work. My organization was one of the organizations that got money from it. Harry was when you do the history, and if you talk to people of that era, if you talk to Andrew Young, if you talk to any of the leaders who run civil rights organizations today, every single one will tell you the catalyst was Harry Belafonte. And when I saw him, we came real close. And one thing he refused to do, I lived in Boston, and the one thing he refused to do was come to Boston. Because he remembered that he performed at a club, if you know anything about Boston, called the North End, which is the Italian section. And he performed at a club, and he was doing his act at his nightclub. And at a table was apparently some mobster folks. And Harry was doing Elvis before Elvis, right? You know, and the woman got all excited. Oh, wow, right? Her husband got mad and started shooting. Harry was able to get out by running across roofs in the North End. He vowed never to come back to Boston. A friend of mine and I finally got him to come back to Boston because we had the African American Museum in Boston was in deep trouble. We finally could visit. I hadn't seen him in 3 years, but when he came back to Boston, he came to Boston, he was going to give a talk at the Mass Institute of Fine Arts. And we were in agreement, my wife and I, his wife Pam, and we were like, hey man, having a little reunion. And I saw my hero. Harry was 6'3". Harry was a stud. But here's this 6'3" man at 90 years old in a wheelchair. His eyesight's go. I got emotional. I was like, oh man, hey. So I said, hey, Harry, why don't you take Pam on a vacation, man? Just go somewhere, like go to Holland, we can get some weed. You know, let's do something like, you know, what we can do and have some fun together. He said, no, I'm not doing that. I said, why aren't you doing that? He said, because you know what, Horace? When you join the movement, it is a lifelong commitment. And my time is not done. And I totally understood. And it's what I live right now. I may be retired in the States because I'm tired of putting up with white people's BS, but I'm still fighting for our community. And the last thing that Harry and I did together was create a National Black Men's Advocacy Network because we need black men in the halls of government advocating for our behalf. Sisters have been carrying this ball since 1619. It's time for us to do our part and to be able to do it without patriarchy. Without patriarchy means working together, dealing with the crap inside our heads, and do the work that needs to be done. And the plan was on March 1st, his 96th birthday, was to go visit state houses and city halls all across the country having a National Men's Advocacy Network, which would help build the organization. Well, people got a little paranoid. Oh, well, you know, man, this is the pandemic, and blah. Okay, so we had a national town hall. The national town hall had more than 3,000 people on that call. And what was agreed upon is that on March 5th, 2024, we are invading state capitals, city halls, town halls, DA offices are all over the country. Right now, we have capacity in 33 states. Our plan is to make sure that in 2024, chocolate men are going to be hurt. Because given everything that's going on, you would think that wouldn't be that hard, right? We're talking about a political party that's banned words, banned books, banned history, banned women's right to choose, promoting hate, promoting all kinds of things. And in the meantime, it looks like we're sitting around doing nothing. And Harry was never a big fan of the Democratic Party because he was about truth. He wasn't big on compromise. We either win or we don't. And that's what I believe as well. We either win or we don't. So the point is, coming into 2024, you would tend to think that this wouldn't be this hard, but apparently it is. So we are going to do our part. And we need to make sure, and I'm going to finish with this, because in the spirit of Harry, in the spirit of decency and simple human justice, in the spirit of caring about every human being, we have to go about the business of doing our work in 2024, which means we need resources, Congresswoman, we need love, we need support to do the work, because this election shouldn't even be this close. But I guess that's what happens when you brainwash a whole bunch of people. Let's hope they don't start bringing Kool-Aid into the mix. But anyway, I want to conclude with that. I want you to understand who, and Harry always had a question when we introduced new people. He would say, name 5 white allies who was a part of this struggle. And I would ask you to go home tonight and do the research. Look up the civil rights movement. Find the 5 white allies who, without their support and their help, this would not be possible. I'll give you one name, Viola Liuzzo. Look it up. Thank you very much, people.
I'm cool. So, all right, bye.
Okay, I guess it is a party. Party! Okay, that's my guy, though. Wow. Thank you, Horace. And I want to just add to the thanks to Ada, because wherever she is in the world, where'd she go? Wherever Ada is, she makes a lot of text calls too, but that's because she's trying to get things done. And so I want to thank Ada for this as well, for all the years. Not in the room right now, but that doesn't mean we can't keep her in the room. I don't know if Audrey Edwards is here, and she's written a book, The American Expat.
Oh.
And it's awesome. And the first time I heard or really discussed, I asked her, what do you think about, why everybody's going crazy? I said, you think it's because we had Obama? She's like, of course it's because we had Obama. They thought they were superior to us until they found out we could be president of the United States, and now they're all going wicked crazy. And that's that group of people that feel disenfranchised that you talked about. I grew up in a world, my mother raised me in a world where we had friends that were Japanese and white and Asian and Chinese, and we had everything in our melting pot of friends and family. And we are the human race.
Yeah.
And if we work together as a human race, then some of the issues that we see or have had to deal with will melt away in the face of love. We need to just love everybody and love each other and stop judging people look at them for the content of their character and the color of their skin, right? Jake Lamar, one of my favorite writers of all times, he's also here. Jake came to Paris and was here writing a book he had written when he was still in New York, The Last Integrationist, I think it was, right? Or all of a sudden it became a big hit because of all of the problems that they were having here in Paris. And so it was brought back to life. And I actually bought it on Amazon.com when it was 1 penny. So I'm glad I got it because I'm sure it's not a penny anymore. So I want to thank everybody that has come, all the members of Gems abroad that are here, black, white, and otherwise, because it's us working together to bring change in a world that's going to make a difference. And I know that my mother, who is an incredible woman, is smiling down on me right now because I'm living in love and not in hate. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank my ancestors. I want to thank you.
Yes.
For your stories, your books. I want to thank you, Horace, for everything you've ever done and the friendship. I must have run over somebody's dog because he's my best friend now, so karma's a bitch. I love this man with all my heart. I really, truly do. And I just want to thank you all for coming. Oh yeah, I have to pay. We need to pay homage to.
Oh, we need to pay, I talk about white allies.
Come to the mic, please.
I'm gonna hear.
Probably.
No.
Look, family, we need to talk about white allies. And one of the greatest ones, last night went back to the ancestors. And there's a lot of my generation who's here who knows who this man is because he saved lives and told the truth. His name was Daniel Ellsberg.
Yeah.
So he was a wonderful ally to the freedom struggle of African Americans. He invested in us, and I just think it's really important that he's been greeted by the ancestors. I know that.
Yep.
So if you're not a member of Gems Abroad, I want to know why not, and I want you on the list. And if you know people that are not members but should be, please encourage them to join us. I hope you enjoyed this program because we intend to do 10,000 more like it. We are a re-energized organization. We got an election coming up, and we have books. Not many, but they're available. So let's get ready for 2024. And thank you all for coming. Happy Juneteenth.